Ceramic tile is one of those things that is noticed, but not always appreciated. Heath Ceramics is changing that. Their award-winning dimensional tiles are small works of art.
It's really interesting when you take a flat wall surface and you put dimension on it with a dimensional tile. And that means that when the light hits it, it can kind of reflect off these different surfaces and it catches your eye. You know, it really draws attention to a pattern or texture in a very interesting way.
The company made its name producing exquisite handcrafted tableware, simple, pure, and functional. It was started 60 years ago by Edith Heath, a headstrong California potter who wanted to make her mark.
She was an artist and a potter, and out of her fascination and love for the craft of ceramics, this company was born. The Heath look is very modern and very clean, but with an organic component to it. That imperfection that we aim for gives it that feel.
In the 1960s, Edith Heath started experimenting with architectural tiles. She soon won a prestigious design medal for her installation on this museum in Pasadena, California.
The entire exterior is clad in Heath tile, and she worked with the architect to design this kind of layered texture in the glazes.
Edith Heath passed away in 2005, but the studio that she opened in Sausalito, California is still here today. The new owners are now carrying the mantle and have just reintroduced Heath's classic oval tiles. They still make them the same way Edith Heath did. The clay is created by the runoff from the Sierra Mountains in Sacramento.
It arrives in 600-pound super sacks, and it's pre-formulated in a dry form, which means it's about 50% clay, actual clay from the clay pit.
The clay powder is loaded into a mixer, where it's combined with water. Gobs of clay from the mixer fall onto a conveyor, heading to what they call a pug mill.
And the pug mill then kneads the clay and has to take out the air. It has to knead it just as if you were rolling dough to give it a certain amount of elasticity. It has a de-airing vacuum that pulls the air out to give it even more plasticity, and then it's extruded into a shape that goes into production.
Once the consistency is just right, they cut the clay into manageable chunks.
It is cut with a wire. Typically you'll get a pug that's about 3 feet long, and then you'll put that on what we call a harp. And a harp is essentially a steel frame with wires spaced a couple of inches apart. And that will cut that 3 foot long pug into a couple of pieces, smaller pieces.
4 pieces at a time are loaded into a press, which stamps the tiles. Unlike most tiles, which are flat, these have dimension, which add depth and intrigue to a room. That's why these tiles have to be cast.
There are 2 halves to a die, a bottom half of a die and a top half of the die. The clay is placed in between those dies. It comes down with about 70 tons of pressure, and the clay is forced into those cavities to create the shape. We make those dies here because there's not a lot of places that make that kind of product.
Coming off the press, the excess surrounding clay is trimmed from the tiles.
The tile at that point is still pretty wet. If you handle it, you're going to put marks in it, you're going to bend it, you're going to warp it. It's still in a pretty delicate condition.
So the clay has to be dried. This slow-moving conveyor rises upward into a low-temperature oven, which removes moisture from the clay.
And by the time it comes out, it's what we call bone dry, and it can be handled at that point.
The edges are given a light sanding and run on a tread mill. A final wipe with a sponge, and they're now ready for glazing.
The glaze is sprayed onto the tile by hand. So you're using a gun that's somewhat like an airbrush. You get parts that are a little bit heavier, a little bit lighter, and what that does is on your finished product, you're kind of getting some range in the color.
Each tile is weighed to know precisely how many grams of glaze it has received. The glazes come in more than 80 colors and are still made in-house using the same recipes that Edith Heath formulated decades ago.
Since we're making our glazes, we're really in control of kind of how they work on the different shapes.
The freshly glazed tiles are then stacked in a kiln.
They will be taken off the glazing boards and pushed onto the shelves in the kiln. And when that kiln is loaded, then we'll fire it.
They stay in the kiln for up to 9 hours at temperatures of up to 2100 degrees Fahrenheit. Then they're left to cool overnight. Once out of the kiln, they get one final quality check before being carefully packed and shipped. Once this box arrives at its destination, it will be up to the tile setter to continue the craftsmanship and legacy of Edith Heath.
We're inspired by Edith every day. I mean, since we're still making her designs and we're still digging out things in a factory sometimes that are experiments that she did. I mean, and sometimes we're even surprised that we'll come up with something that we think is new and she did it before. So I think her, her philosophy of simple, good things for good people is something that we like to live by.